In most programming languages, there is something called loops. Basically, you can write a piece of code to repeat itself over and over again until a certain condition has been met. There are a few types of loops in PHP, so let's start by taking a look at what is called the while loop. Now, before we jump into that, make sure you got your loops.php file queued up. Obviously, you're going to have your basic structure. I'm hooking in the Bootstrap CSS and JS down here simply so we can have a nicer page to look at. I'm defining the title up here, loops, with a constant, and I'm echoing the title here and down here in the Bootstrap container class here. And then I just have a PHP script queued up ready to start doing some PHP. Now, you can obviously take this straight from the final course files folder that you download at the beginning of the section. You can copy and paste from a previous lecture, and you can also just copy what I have on the screen. Whatever works best for you to get yourself up to speed, you know the drill. All right, so the while loop syntax looks like this. So while, and then condition is true. So let's say you want to echo the numbers from 50 to 100. First, you need to set a variable with your starting number. So let's create a variable, and I'm going to say starting num is equal to 50. Then you need to start your while loop with a condition. In this case, we want our condition to say, while my starting number is less than or equal to 100, the condition is true. So that would look like this. I'm going to replace this placeholder text to starting num is less than or equal to 100. So while starting number is less than or equal to 100, execute code. Now you might be thinking our starting number is 50. So therefore it will always be less than 100. Well, if it stayed the same, if we didn't do anything to change that value, you'd be right. But each time we loop through our while loop, we're going to tell PHP to increment starting num by 1. Therefore, eventually our starting number will equal and become greater than 100. So our condition here says to stop looping once the value is greater than 100. So I know this says less than or equal to, but basically that means it's going to keep looping right up until it gets to the value 101, because if it's less than, it will be 99 and lower. But if it's equal to, it will be 100. So 100 is still valid for the loop to keep going, but 101 is not. So that's where it will stop. So we need to do this in order to prevent what is called an infinite loop, something that you really don't want to happen. An infinite loop means your function or your script will literally run forever, which can cause that spinning beach ball of death if you're using a Mac, or a never-ending hourglass icon on a PC. Basically, it's just going to keep running. It's just going to use all your CPU, and you're just going to sit there with probably a frozen computer and have to restart. Nothing crazy, but super annoying and terrible practice. So let's tell PHP to echo our starting number, then increment by the variable by 1. So we're going to go in here, execute code, echo. I'm going to say starting num. And then I'm just going to put a non-breaking space here, HTML entity, just to put a space in between each number. So we echoed the number, but now we need to increment that number by 1 each time you loop through. So you do that like so. Increment by 1, and that will look like this, starting num plus plus. You can also decrement values by using the minus. Oops, minus, there we go. But we want to increment by 1 each time. That's what that says. That's a common convention in PHP. So now let's see what happens in our browser here. So there we go, 51, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, blah, 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 right up to 100. So we looped through from 50 to 100, and you see how it stopped. And you can obviously change these values. You can say 1,000, and then it will show that many numbers. If you want it to be something smaller, like, let's say 70, then there you go. And you kind of get the idea there. So that is the while loop. Let me just put a comment there for you. While loop. Now there's another loop called the for loop. You'd use the for loop when you know in advance how many times the script should run. So the syntax is as follows. So essentially, the for loop will initialize where the loop will start counting by adding a value to a variable. So we'll do that by creating a variable. Then it will evaluate a certain condition to test if the condition is either true or false. If the condition is false, the loop will stop running. Then we want to increment the value by 1 each time we loop through. So if we want our for loop to spit out the numbers 30 through 40, we could code the following. So in place of initialize counter, we're going to say the variable a is assigned the value 30. And then the condition that we want to test to see if it's true is the variable a is less than or equal to 40. Then we want to increment the counter. So then we'll just say a plus plus. So here we're saying the variable is equal to 30. Now we're testing to see if the variable a, or the value, is less than or equal to 40. And while that's true, increment the value by 1 each time we loop through. So echo, we're going to say number, a, and then a break tag. And basically, let's see what happens here. So you see we got number 30, number 31, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 40. So number 30 through 40. Basically, that's because we have our initial variable here. We're testing to see if our condition is true, and then we're incrementing each time we loop through. So it increments from 30, 31, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 40. And then we're echoing it each time that is true, and then it dies once it is false. While I have you here, let's take a look at yet another loop. We're going to take a look at the for each loop. Now, the for each loop is incredibly popular in programming languages, especially PHP. The primary purpose of a for each loop is to loop through each key value pair in an array. So it works directly with arrays. It looks a little bit like this. For each, this is the syntax, array as value. So this is the syntax of a for each loop. Basically, here's what happens during each loop iteration. We're going to assign a value of a current array element to the variable value. So right here, we're looking for an array. So remember how arrays are stored in a variable. So we're going to take that initial variable, which has the entire array, and then each time we're going to loop through each of the values in the array and store them in what is called this variable right here. Now these could be different. This could be foo, bar, a, b, x, y. It could be fancy and then pants, or it could be people and then person. It could be whatever you want here. But essentially the context, essentially the convention is to take the initial variable and then singular that variable. So it would be something like if you were to say people and then person. So if we have an array with the variable called people or friends, you'd want to say friends as friend. And I'll show you now in a second if that didn't make any sense. So then the value is going to be echoed on the screen inside the loop. And then the array pointer then moves to the next element within the array. And then you repeat from the beginning until the final array element. So let's actually use a real world example so this makes sense to you. So right here, we need to first create an array. So as I was using the friends example, we're going to create an array. And it's going to just be a simple array. And we're just going to list out some friends in an array. We're going to say Jim. We're going to say Sandra, Kyle, and Cassandra. So we have our friends array. Now what we want to do is loop through our friends array. So instead of this, we're going to say friends as we need to give it a variable for the singular value in that array, and that will be friend. And like I said, this could be anything you want, but this just makes most sense because now what we're going to do is output each individual value in the array. Echo friend, do you see now how I'm referencing this variable, is my friend. And then a break tag. So simple. Let's see what happens. Jim is my friend, Sandra is my friend, Kyle is my friend, Cassandra is my friend. So you can see here, we're looping through the array, friends, and each individual value is stored in this variable. And then once it's done that loop, it's going to go right back and it's going to reassign a new value to this variable. So they're all using the variable called friend, as you can see here. That's why the value changes every single time you loop through. Okay, now one last loop before I drive you crazy. It's called the do-while loop. I always want to say it's called the do-wop loop. Just it sounds a bit more fun. The do-while loop. Okay, so the do-while loop is kind of like a while loop, but there's one major difference. The while loop will only start if the condition is true, whereas the do-while loop will always execute the first time and then evaluate whether the condition is true afterwards and will continue or not. So the syntax looks like this. Do, and then while, condition to be met. So simple. Basically in here, you execute code, it does it the first time, and then it checks the condition. If it's true, it will do it again until this is no longer true. So here's an example. We're going to create a little variable here called, let's just say foo equals 10. Do, so I'm going to do this code first. We're going to say echo numero foo and then a break tag. So it's going to echo the initial value first. Then it's going to check a condition. And we're going to say foo is less than or equal to 50. Now, currently, it will always be less than or equal to 50, and we're going to get an infinite loop. So we need to increment that value. So we're going to say foo plus plus. Let's say increment by 1. So we're going to do this code, echo this, and then increment by 1, then check the condition. So if foo is less than or equal to 50, and it's going to keep doing this until 10, this variable value here turns into 51. Okay, here we go. Numero 10, 11, 12, so on and so forth, right to 50. So there we go. That is the do while loop. So basically, like I said, it is first doing the code. So it's going to do this code first always. Then it's going to check the condition. So let's just see. What if we just said foo is less than or equal to 10? What's going to happen? We're going to get numero 10, and it's going to stop there because it does it first, and then it checks the condition. Hey, it's not true. There we go. It stops. That's how the do while loop works. So we talked about the while loop, for each loop, and do while loop. I encourage you to go through this lecture again, play around with the values, and read up on the official documentation on PHP's website and the W3 Schools website, because it kind of gives you a few more examples and just will let you become a bit more familiar with the loops and how you can use them. But we're going to be playing around with some of these again as we go further into the course. See you then.